This is not going to be a popular post, but look, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but Joni Lamb, everyone knew how mean she was. Everyone that worked in the industry around her, like her kids have taken a lot of slack for standing up for themselves and talking about the toxicity. The reality is that her reputation preceded her.
Everyone knew how mean she was. A clip started moving around TikTok not long ago. Someone who said they had worked in Christian broadcasting, not a major platform, not a verified journalist, just a person on the internet with their own memories to share, looked directly into the camera and said something plain. She said, "Joni Lamb." Everyone knew how mean she was. Everyone who worked in the industry around her. Her kids have taken a lot of slack for standing up for themselves and talking about the toxicity. When you interacted with Joni, you were dismissed. She was not a nice lady. And I remember being in Benny Hinn's office talking about it. And at first I thought it was just me. And then I realized, no, she was mean to everybody. One person's account is one person's account. I am not going to stand here and tell you that a single TikTok video is proof of anything by itself. It is not. One story, one voice, one set of memories. That is a data point, not a verdict. But here is what made me stop scrolling past it. It was not just that one video. It was what showed up in the comments underneath it. Regular people, no platform, no agenda, no coordination, typing what they remembered and what they experienced. Nobody asked them to show up. Nobody organized them. They just recognized something in what that woman said and they added their own. That is still not a courtroom. That is still not journalism. People on the internet typing their feelings does not convict anybody of anything. But it does tell you something. It tells you there is a pattern of reputation that existed long before the controversies of the last few years, made Joni Lamb's name a household word in accountability circles. And the question that pattern raises is simple. Is there anything more solid than internet comments behind it? There is. There is a lot more, and it goes back 15 years. Before we go further, I want to be direct about what this video is doing and what it is not doing. Everything in this script is sourced from documented, publicly reported material. Federal lawsuits reported by NBC5 Dallas-Fort Worth, the Dallas Morning News, and the Dallas Observer. A Bedford Police Department statement from December 8, 2010. Investigative reporting by the Roy's Report and Julie Roy's, and the documented public record of how those cases resolved. All three of the primary lawsuits we are going to discuss were ultimately dismissed or withdrawn without going to trial. Daystar has denied the allegations raised in those suits. No court issued findings of wrongdoing against the organization or its leadership. We will say that clearly every time it is relevant. The lawsuits are part of the record. Their dismissals are equally part of the record. Both matter. Neither cancels the other out. What we are doing in this video is examining what was alleged, by whom, over what period of time, in what sequence, and whether those allegations, taken together, describe something coherent. A pattern has either been consistent across time and across different people, or it has not. The documented record answers that question without requiring us to make a single claim that has not been publicly verified. Let us go back to 2010. Before TikTok existed, before most people following this story had ever heard Jonathan Lamb's name in this context. Before the controversies of 2023 and 2024, there was a real lawsuit filed in federal court, reported by NBC5 Dallas-Fort Worth, not a YouTube narrator, not a podcast host, a verified television news affiliate, and it said something specific. Karen Thompson was a longtime producer of The Joni Show, Joni Lamb's own program at Daystar. She had worked closely with Joni for years. In January 2010, Karen began a relationship with a male co-worker. According to the lawsuit, reported by NBC5 DFW, Joni Lamb told Thompson to end that relationship. And then, according to the suit, for approximately 2 hours, Joni Lamb berated, belittled, and harassed Thompson. 2 hours. Not a brief confrontation. Not a tense conversation that escalated and then de-escalated. 2 continuous hours of berating the woman who produced her own show over a personal relationship that, and this is in the lawsuit, was not in violation of any company policy. When Karen refused to end the relationship, the lawsuit documented what followed. She was demoted, she was barred from the studio, and she was told in language the lawsuit put on the record that Joni Lamb did not even want to see her face. That is not a personality quirk. That is not a leader having a bad day. That is a documented institutional response to a personal decision, sustained for 2 hours, and then followed by a formal professional punishment for an employee who had committed no policy violation. And the lawsuit did not stop there. It named a double standard directly and by example. It pointed out that Marcus Lamb himself was never demoted following what the suit described as an illicit relationship with a female Daystar vice president. A relationship that, as reporting and other court documents established, had been going on for approximately 7 years. Marcus Lamb was not disciplined. He was not demoted. He was not banned from any studio. He was not told anyone did not want to see his face. The lawsuit also pointed directly to a second example. Joni Lamb's own father, Bill Trammell, who held a senior role at Daystar. The suit alleged that Trammell was never disciplined for sexually harassing a female employee. That claim became its own separate lawsuit filed by a woman named Jennifer Falcon. Falcon's suit, reported by NBC5 DFW and the Christian Post, alleged that Trammell subjected her to unwanted sexual advances over an extended period. By 2008, according to the lawsuit, Trammell had told Falcon he wanted to be her husband and that no one could love her the way he could. The suit described unwanted physical contact, hugging her too tight and too long, reaching toward areas of her body that had no business being touched. 2 months after Falcon reported the conduct, her pay was cut. 9 days after that cut, which itself came 9 days after an outstanding performance review, she was fired. Bill Trammell received a pay raise that same year. Let that sequence settle for a moment. The woman who reported the conduct had her pay cut and was fired 9 days after her best performance review. The man she reported received a raise the same year. That is not a coincidence. That is not an accident of timing. That is what institutional protection of powerful men looks like when it is written down in court documents. The pattern the Karen Thompson lawsuit named was real. Men in this family kept their positions regardless of their conduct. Women who spoke up about those positions lost theirs. Now let me bring in the person who sits at the center of this documented history, because the most significant account of what the Daystar institutional culture looked like from the inside belongs to a woman named Janette Hawkins. And her story does not come from TikTok. It comes from a 15-year period of documented silence followed by a recorded interview with the Roy's Report, where she finally told the full account of what happened to her. Janette Hawkins was Daystar's marketing director. In 2005, she left a secular media career where she was earning approximately $250,000 a year to take a position at Daystar for $80,000, a $170,000 annual pay cut. She made that choice because she believed she was joining something with genuine spiritual integrity. Before she accepted the offer, she asked directly both Marcus Lamb and Janice Smith, who was then Daystar's VP of Programming, Marketing, and Affiliate Relations, and Janette's direct supervisor, about the network's moral standards. Both assured her, according to Janette's account, that Daystar held to the highest standards of Christian behavior. At that exact moment, Marcus Lamb and Janice Smith had already been engaged in a personal relationship for approximately 5 years. She was told about the highest standards by the two people who were already at that exact moment in violation of those standards. She took the $170,000 pay cut on the basis of that conversation. In August 2007, a Daystar employee named Terry Germany discovered emails proving the affair had been ongoing for approximately 7 years, and that Marcus had written to Janice that he could not wait to make her the next Mrs. Marcus Lamb. Daystar funds had reportedly been used to facilitate the relationship. Janette and a colleague brought this information to marriage counselors Fred and Anna Kendall, who advised that Marcus should step down and seek counseling, but declined to confront him directly, leaving that responsibility to Janette. Janette and her colleague then reported what they knew to Bill Trammell, Joni's father, who passed the information to Joni. According to Janette's account, Joni thanked her for bringing it forward. The lawsuit noted evidence suggesting Joni may have already been aware of the situation before that conversation. Janice Smith was subsequently pushed out of Daystar quietly. The organization purchased her house and paid her through what the lawsuit described as a sham consulting agreement, compensation for services she never actually performed, as a structured exit package to manage her departure without public explanation. Janette was then directed to participate in covering up the real reason for Janice Smith's departure. She was asked to present a false account of why Janice had left. She refused. She resigned in May 2008. What followed, according to Janette's account given to the Roy's Report 15 years later, was a period of harassment, surveillance, and professional destruction that she describes not in procedural terms, but in human ones. She told Julie Roys, "I felt like I was spiritually raped." She said there was nothing left, that everything had been taken. She was followed. Private investigators tracked her movements. She said that in the year the surveillance was most intense, she received more traffic tickets than she had accumulated in her entire driving life. A detail she offered not as a complaint about citations, but as evidence of how closely she was being observed by people who were not law enforcement. She was also, during this exact period, caring for a terminally ill stepmother who had been given 6 months to live. Her entire sense of identity, by her own explicit account, had been built around her work at Daystar. She had given up a secular career, earning 3 times her ministry salary. She was not married. She did not have children. That job, that calling, was her purpose and her community. And it was taken from her, in her account, not because she failed at it, but because she told the truth about what she had found. The combination of factors Janette describes: total loss of professional identity, active surveillance, the physical stress of caring for a dying family member, complete professional blacklisting, is precisely the kind of compound collapse that leads human beings to the darkest places they can go. And Janette named that in her interview publicly and specifically. She described becoming suicidal. She described being involuntarily committed during that period. She named it not to seek sympathy, but because she wanted people going through similar experiences in institutional Christianity to know they are not alone, and that they do not have to carry it in silence the way she did for 15 years. Now here is where this story moves from painful to something that should make every honest person sit up straight. 2 days before Janette's attorney was set to file her lawsuit, Marcus and Joni Lamb were tipped off. And 2 days before the women he was about to be named by could even get their filing into court, they went on Daystar's own program, Celebration, and got ahead of the story themselves. Marcus told their audience that there were 3 people who were not involved in what he was talking about, not affected by their marital challenge, who were saying that unless Daystar paid them $7.5 million, they would take the story to the media. He described it as an extortion attempt. He framed the women as people trying to turn their pain to gain. He said Daystar would not take God's money to keep from being humiliated again on national religious television, 2 days before the women he was naming could file their own legal response, 2 days before they could say a single word publicly about what they had experienced. Bedford Police Department investigated the extortion claim. On December 8, 2010, they issued their finding. Bedford Police Department, December 8, 2010. No evidence of criminal conduct under Texas law. Investigation closed. No criminal conduct. The women were cleared. The very next day, December 9, 2010, Dr. Phil aired a nationally broadcast program featuring Marcus and Joni Lamb, in which they repeated the extortion accusation. The program did not reach out to Janette or the other women for their side of the story. It did not note that Bedford Police had cleared them of any criminal conduct the day before. Robin Roberts appeared on Good Morning America and referred to the women as blackmailers. For 15 years, the last public word most people had ever heard about Janette Hawkins was extortionist, not because it was true, because Marcus and Joni Lamb had a national platform and she did not, because the Dr. Phil producers did not call her for comment, because a morning show anchor had a dramatic word that fit a segment and used it without verification, and because Janette, for 15 years, was too devastated and too afraid to fight it. The 3 lawsuits, Janette Hawkins, Karen Thompson, and Jennifer Falcon, were all ultimately dismissed or withdrawn without going to trial and without any payments being made, as documented by the Dallas Morning News. Daystar agreed to drop its own countersuits at the same time. No court issued findings of wrongdoing. That is the legal record, and it is part of this story. Lower third. All 3 lawsuits dismissed/withdrawn without trial. No payments made, no court findings of wrongdoing. Daystar countersuits also dropped. Source, Dallas Morning News. But the legal dismissal of a lawsuit is not the same thing as a finding that the events underlying it did not occur. Courts dismiss cases for procedural reasons, evidentiary reasons, financial resource disparities, and settlement dynamics that have nothing to do with the underlying truth of what happened. The record of what was alleged by named individuals on documented timelines reported by verified news organizations does not disappear because the lawsuits did not reach a verdict. Janette Hawkins made an observation in her interview with the Roy's report that is worth sitting with carefully. She said that to understand Daystar, you have to understand that it operates as a business, a family business, and that the ministry framing is, in her experience, the product they are selling. She said they hire people from secular media specifically because they know how to reach an audience, how to shape a message, how to drive financial engagement, and they treat the ministry as exactly that, a product, a vehicle for financial growth. She also described the selective enforcement of institutional standards that others have documented. Her own part-time assistant, for instance, split her work hours between supporting Janette's ministry work and serving as a part-time nanny for Joni's children, picking them up from school on Daystar's clock and Daystar's payroll. A different employee was let go for using studio equipment on a personal side project. The same institution that allowed ministry resources to flow into the Lamb family's personal domestic arrangements had zero tolerance for a rank-and-file employee doing something comparable. The standard, she said, depended entirely on whose family you belong to. That observation is not an abstraction. It is a documented, specific example of two different institutional standards operating simultaneously inside the same organization at the same time. Now place 2010 directly next to what happened in 2023 and 2024 with Jonathan and Susie Lamb. Because the parallels are not loose or thematic, they are specific and sequential. In 2010, Karen Thompson raised a concern. She was berated for 2 hours, demoted, and banned from the studio. Daystar publicly labeled the women who exposed wrongdoing as extortionists on national television, one day after police cleared them of any crime. In 2023 and 2024, Jonathan Lamb raised concerns about an alleged abuse cover-up and financial management issues. He was surveilled. He was given an NDA ultimatum. He was fired, handed a termination letter by a guard wearing a bulletproof vest, and Daystar publicly characterized his actions as a smear campaign driven by disappointment at not becoming president. 2 different decades, 2 different specific situations, 2 different people, 1 identical institutional reflex. Somebody raises a real concern, and instead of investigating the concern, the organization investigates the person who raised it, labels them, discredits them, turns the table so that the person who spoke becomes the story, and the thing they said disappears. That is not 2 incidents of bad judgment 14 years apart. That is a documented organizational behavior pattern. It does not require malice in any individual moment. It does not require a conscious conspiracy. Cultural patterns reproduce themselves because the people who internalize them do not think of them as a strategy. They think of them as the way things work. They have watched it work every time before, and so they do it again. That is what institutional muscle memory looks like. And then Gentezin Franklin preached at Joni Lamb's memorial service. That event, a service billed as a celebration of Joni's life and legacy, became the subject of a detailed analysis by Julie Roys of the Roys Report, who characterized Franklin's eulogy as spiritually abusive. Multiple people who watched the service described it in similar terms. A pastor using a position of spiritual authority at a grief service to publicly rebuke Jonathan and Susie Lamb, to shame critics of the ministry, at the very moment when, by any human and pastoral standard, a son grieving his mother's death deserved to be held rather than corrected. The pattern did not stop when Joni Lamb died. It kept running on the same track it had always run, using the same tools, aimed at the same target, even at a funeral. If a pattern shows up even at a funeral, if the institutional reflex to neutralize the people who raised questions keeps functioning even after the person at the center of it is gone, that tells you something definitive. The pattern was never really about any individual. It was about the culture, and cultures outlive the people who built them. Let me say directly what I think needs to be said before we close, because it would be easy in laying out this documented pattern to let the institutional analysis substitute for attention to the human beings living inside it. Janette Hawkins gave up a $250,000 career because she believed in something. She went to work at Daystar because the people running it told her it stood for integrity. She discovered that was not true. She did the right thing with that discovery. She went to the proper channels, reported through proper process, gave leadership the opportunity to handle it correctly. And what she got back was surveillance, professional destruction, public labeling as a criminal on national television, and 15 years of carrying a false reputation that cost her professionally in ways the lawsuits and their dismissals never fully addressed. She named what it did to her with clarity and with courage. She described becoming suicidal. She described being hospitalized. She described still being in trauma therapy 15 years later for what she experienced inside a Christian institution that claimed to represent the highest moral standards in the industry. Karen Thompson produced a show for years, building her professional life around a ministry, and was berated for 2 hours over a personal choice that violated nothing. Jennifer Falcon reported conduct by a man in a position of authority over her and was fired 9 days after her best performance review, while the man she reported received a raise. These are not abstractions. These are named women who lost real things: careers, reputations, mental health, income, inside an institution that presented itself to the world as a vessel of the gospel. The question that documented record asks of every one of us, whether we are running a television network or a household or a small group Bible study, is not complicated. It is this: when someone around you tells you a hard truth, what does it cost them? If telling you the truth costs them something every single time, that is not a string of bad luck. That is a culture. And only the person with power inside that culture can decide, on purpose, to build something different. So, was Joni Lamb mean? That was the question someone asked on TikTok, and it is the question that opened this episode. Here is the honest answer the documented record provides. A federal lawsuit, reported by a verified television news station, documented 2 solid hours of berating, belittling, and harassing a longtime employee over a personal relationship that violated no company policy, followed by demotion, studio banishment, and a statement that Joni did not want to see her face. A marketing director who left a $250,000 secular career to serve the ministry was pressured to cover up a 7-year affair, refused, was harassed and surveilled when she would not comply, was publicly labeled a criminal on national television one day after police cleared her of any crime, and spent 15 years in the aftermath of that experience still dealing with its effects. And 15 years after those 2 women were pushed out of Daystar, Joni's own son described the same exact sequence. Raised a concern, was surveilled, was given a silence or leave ultimatum, was fired, and was publicly labeled as a disgruntled employee running a smear campaign. 3 different people, 14 to 15 years apart, one documented pattern. Only God knows what was in Joni Lamb's heart. That is true, and I mean it without irony or sarcasm. The eternal accounting of any person's soul belongs to God, and to God alone. We do not stand in that place. We do not pretend to. But the pattern her organization left behind in lawsuits, in police reports, in news coverage, in documented board meeting audio, in whistleblower testimony, that pattern is not a matter of theological judgment. It is a matter of public record. And the public record says that inside Daystar, across more than a decade and through multiple specific situations, telling the truth cost people something every single time. That is the lesson this episode leaves on the table. Not as a condemnation of one person's soul, as a mirror for every institution, every church, every ministry, every family, every organization that claims to operate in God's name. Are the people around you safe telling you the truth? Or do they know from experience that honesty costs something inside the walls you've built? Build a place where the truth doesn't cost people everything. That is the only institution worth building. Until next time, stay rooted, stay real, stay in the Word. God bless.